300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Monday morning. I am back from across the country. I'm back across from the pond. Spent a couple weeks in France, but we're back. A lot to talk about in sports while I was away. And I want to start with the NFL because obviously we're getting close to the start of the season. It's hard to believe that the offseason's almost done in a month. In the first week of September, the NFL is back. It's a great feeling. Fall is always one of the best times of the year, generating buzz. We're getting excited. And there's been a lot of buzz around the Arizona Cardinals throughout this entire offseason with Kyler Murray. Would he stay? Was he pissed off with the Cardinals organization? Well, we've cleared it up. He got his new contract extension, 5 years, $230 million, $160 million in guarantees. He signed through the 2028 season. This happened over the end of last week on Friday. So that's already put to bed. He's with the Cardinals. He got the deal. That's what he was seeking. He has said all the right things. He said all the right things since he signed this contract, that he's always wanted to be here the entire time, that there's no place he'd rather be. So from a PR standpoint, he's doing what he needs to do for damage control. He and his agent are trying to bounce back after what was a bit of a turbulent offseason, to say the least. We obviously know that Kyler is a little bit of a diva. He acted a bit petulantly and immaturely over the offseason, scrubbing his social media accounts of anything related to the Arizona Cardinals in an attempt to try to stranglehold the Cardinals and force their hand into signing him and getting a deal done quickly. Obviously, he still had 2 years remaining on his rookie contract, but because of his style of play, because of the number of hits that he's taken, he wanted to lock up his long-term security. And he knew and he knows that his style of play isn't conducive to staying healthy beyond perhaps another contract. And he wants to sign up that long-term security. So from that perspective, I completely understood his decision to pursue a new contract, to be aggressive with it. But when he had his agent come out for him and release that statement a couple months ago, basically reaffirming Kyler's commitment to the organization, but also listing several demands in order for him to return, it further shined a bigger light on Kyler Murray and his relationship with the Cardinals and perhaps his displeasure with the organization. So now that that's taken care of, because again, Murray is a smaller guy. He's a little bit more fragile, prone to injury. He's always been healthy throughout the season. He's been in the NFL 3 years. He's managed to stay around throughout the entire season. He played all 16 games his first 2 years. He played 14 of 17 last year. The problem's been he always gets banged up and he gets nicked up. And his team falters down the stretch. We've seen it in 3 consecutive years especially last year. They lost to the Rams in the wild card game, but they started out the year 7-0. They were 10-2 at one point, and they finished the last 5 games going 1-4. So the question is, what should the expectations be, not only of Kyler, but also the Arizona Cardinals as a team? And so for me, what this contract indicates not only is the commitment that the Cardinals have made to Kyler Murray, but from Kyler Murray's end, this is a guy who has to set a goal for himself to stay healthy. This is a guy who now needs to prove that he can last throughout an entire season, and not just technically last, meaning that his name is written into the QB1 position, but that he can actually be healthy and that he can perform throughout the entire season. Because again, the Cardinals have always jumped out to quick starts under his leadership, but then have kind of tumbled down the stretch. So for him, this is a major opportunity, a major season for him to prove to the Cardinals that he can stay healthy throughout the duration of the season. That's the first big goal. I think that he is still someone who is going to continue to rack up Pro Bowl selections. This is a guy who was the #1 overall pick and the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2019. He's received back-to-back. He's made back-to-back Pro Bowl selections. I think that all those accolades are going to continue to come his way. I think he's someone who is going to be a perennial Pro Bowl selector, or selection rather. But the question is, and I really actually like Kyler Murray as a player. I think he is unique in the sense that he's got the quickest feet and the quickest acceleration that I've ever seen. I don't think, excuse me, I don't think that anyone has the type of explosive burst right out of the gates, the 0 to 60 Ferrari engine that he has. Lamar Jackson can be faster in the open field, but as far as going from 0 to 60, I think Kyler's got the quickest feet in the NFL. So for Kyler, that's the individual expectation, is that he's going to stay mature. He's going to lead the Arizona Cardinals consistently to the postseason. And that's the expectation that the Cardinals should have for themselves as an organization signing this new deal. Obviously, they understand that you can't accomplish anything in the NFL without a very, very good quarterback. They recognize that they've got one of a handful of excellent quarterbacks in their building, and they wanted to lock him up. But what that means is that this should be a perennial playoff team. This should be a perennial wild card team at the bare minimum. And when you look at the NFC, you look at the future of the NFC during the length of this contract and which teams are still going to be viable during that time. Right now, it's very open in the NFC, and those expectations should be right there. There should be a lot of pressure heaped onto the Cardinals to perform, because the Bucs are going to likely not do much after Brady retires. Same thing with the Green Bay Packers. After that, you've got the Rams that are going to stay in contention. Dallas and the Eagles are still going to be relevant, but that's about it. The 49ers, of course, under Shanahan, are always going to be tough, and they'll probably build themselves back up and stay competitive. But outside of that, it's for the Cardinals to compete perhaps with the Rams at the top for that conference. The Saints will be coming. They're going to be humming a little bit more next year. But there really aren't many obstacles in their way that should derail this team in the Cardinals from doing something special. Now, I think that the future for them is competing for an NFC championship. I think they can do that. I think they can reach the Super Bowl. I don't necessarily envision them winning a Super Bowl, but I could see them competing for one and being in that Final Four. But regardless of whether or not they can win the Super Bowl, I think they can make an appearance there over the next 5 years. So that should be the standard. That should be the expectation for this team now that Kyler has signed this new deal. Because I also think that there are just so many really talented young quarterbacks in the AFC, and those teams are coming. I think they might be too much for the Cardinals as currently constructed for a team like Arizona to overtake a Bills or a Chiefs or Broncos, really that AFC West, the Raiders, amongst other teams. So that's the expectation right now for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm glad that they got a deal done. I actually do like Kyler Murray. It was unpleasant to have to chronicle how we got here and their relationship over the last several months, but we're here, and congrats to him. That's a major, major contract for him to sign up to sign to. I think it was about $100 million perhaps in signing bonus. So he's taken care of. The Cardinals are taken care of for the future, and we'll see what Arizona is able to do over the next 5 to 7 years. So I want to transition now to another team. Actually just mentioned them at the end of this last segment, the Las Vegas Raiders. A lot of buzz around them. Of course, with their offseason moves, they've been doing a great job staying competitive in the AFC West. But the big notable signing was Davante Adams. And Davante Adams has had a lot of interesting quotes, a lot of interesting things to say, especially recently. He kind of made a comparison between Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers. But the main point he was making was that anytime you are transitioning from one quarterback to the next, there's going to be an adjustment period. Now, a lot of media outlets ran with the notion that Davante Adams was claiming that Derek Carr is a Hall of Famer, similar to Aaron Rodgers being a Hall of Famer. That's not exactly what he was saying. What he was saying was that Derek Carr is on a Hall of Fame path, like his former quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. And the fact that you've got two special quarterbacks going to be throwing it to him, he was simply making the case that there's going to be an adjustment period. And that was his main point. But whether it's two regular standard Joe quarterbacks or whether it's two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, there's going to be a transition period. Now, obviously, Davante Adams, we know he's had history with Derek Carr. There's a special relationship there. The two of them were college teammates at Fresno State. So it's understandable that he would speak so glowingly about Derek Carr. That's not a surprise. It's not just to prop up your quarterback. They also have a legitimate relationship and perhaps bromance between the two. So he's saying all the right things. He is pumping up his teammate. I've got no issue with that. It begs the question, where will Derek Carr be in several years? Is he, in fact, on pace to make the Hall of Fame? And I think it's so difficult to be a prognosticator in this situation, to try to project out into the future, to predict what this guy is going to be in the next several years, because Derek Carr is only 31. So whatever opinion you have about him now, whatever opinion I'm going to share about him now, there is still a lot more room on the canvas for him to paint the entire picture. So I want to preface that by saying that nothing is etched in stone. The slab is still wet. It's still cooling. There's still room to expand it and to manipulate that stone slab. But when I look at Derek Carr, I think it's important to remember that there are a lot of examples of guys in the NFL who started their careers certain ways, but they finished a lot stronger. And because of that, it's managed to catapult them and propel them into a stratosphere that perhaps we wouldn't have seen them in any other circumstance. I think when you look at a guy like Derek Carr, he just completed his 8th season in the NFL. He's about to embark on his 9th season. Oftentimes, we overlook what Derek Carr's had to deal with as far as his surroundings. Because I actually have been really impressed with Derek Carr. I think he's had a really, really solid career when you give the fact, or you consider the fact that this is someone that's had to deal with so much turmoil around him. There's been so much lack of structure and management within the Las Vegas Raiders organization during the time that he's been there. There have been so many off-the-field transgressions, the John Gruden fiasco, players getting suspended, players getting cut because of, again, off-the-field issues. And he's had to traverse all of that, and yet he has still managed to be the consummate professional, be the consummate leader, and he's been producing on the field. Now, again, does that mean that right now, at this very moment in time, would he be elected into the Hall of Fame? No. But remember, this is someone who, over the course of his time with the Raiders, he's made the postseason twice. In 2016, he had arguably the best season of his career. He was a finalist for MVP, finished third in the rankings as a finalist. But what happened was he suffered a broken fibula in week 16 against the Colts, and the Raiders lost to the Houston Texans and Deshaun Watson in the divisional game, or in the wild card game, rather. But then you look at last year, he threw for his most passing yards. And in fact, the last 4 years for Derek Carr, he's been on this incredible trajectory where he's eclipsed 4,000 yards in all 4 seasons, and his completion percentage has been through the roof. It's been the best of his career the last 4 years. He is throwing 69%, 70%, 67%, and 68% over the last 4 years. Those are astonishingly high numbers, however you slice it. So what's hurt him, and again, as we know, the Hall of Fame is not simply about your individual success, but it's also works in concert with your team success. So much about guys qualifying and being accepted into the NFL Hall of Fame, and really in any sport, has to do with the team success. Did you perform well individually, and how did you do as a team? How did you elevate your team? And what's hurt Derek Carr the most is the team success, is the lack of team success specifically, because 5 seasons they finished below 500. Only 1 season in 2020 did they finish 500 at 8-8. So when we look at certain guys, and in particular how a team's success has helped elevate their status, there's no better example than Eli Manning. Because Eli Manning, obviously, within the first 5 years of his career with the Giants, he won a Super Bowl in 2008. They dismantled and upended this undefeated season quest by the New England Patriots. And then in his 9th season, in 2012, the Giants won again. They beat the Patriots again. But Eli Manning, in the eyes of many, is a borderline Hall of Famer. Not everyone views Eli Manning as a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, or even a Hall of Famer at all, because his stats through his first 8 years in the league actually aren't more impressive than Derek Carr. Derek Carr's had more impressive numbers over the first 8 seasons of his career. So then why do we view Eli Manning in this certain way? Well, he's performed in certain huge moments, and he's helped lead his team in 2 incredible postseasons to 2 improbable Super Bowls. And that's why we view him in the light that we do. But the point is, he's only had 2 years in which Derek Carr, speaking of, has led the Raiders to the postseason. So the lack of a lot of postseason success has been the biggest inhibitor that's impeding perhaps his path to reaching the Hall of Fame. But I don't think that we've taken into account, again, perhaps the lack of talent that he's had to deal with. And now we're going to really be able to evaluate him over the next 2 years, because he no longer has Tony Sparano or Jack Del Rio or John Gruden or Rich Bisaccia as his head coach. He now has Josh McDaniels, who I think is going to be a lot better with the Raiders. He's an offensive mind. They've got a lot of offensive pieces with Davante Adams and Henry Ruggs, and not Henry Ruggs. Unfortunately, he is an example of one of the guys that had off the field transgressions. But Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs, they've got a lot of talent with Derek Carr, and that offense is going to be electric, I think, this upcoming year. But this is going to be the most talent he's ever had to work with. Again, there's only a handful of guys in their first several years in the league where you can already say, okay, they're Hall of Famers. Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes are the most notable recent examples of that type of early success. Most guys don't attain that type of success that quickly in their career. It takes them several years, perhaps into that second, third contract, to achieve the type of team success that's warranted to be considered a Hall of Famer. So as of right now, at age 31, do I think that he is going to make the Hall of Fame? No, I don't. But again, he still has plenty of runway left to work with. And I don't think it's inconceivable that perhaps if he can attain a lot of team success in the next several years, that our perception may change. Just ask Matthew Stafford what winning that one Super Bowl did for him in his legacy, in his career. I think perhaps that solidified him as a future Hall of Famer. Could there be a similar effect on Derek Carr if he's able to win? I think there might. I think there might be. So I'm not going to rule it out just yet. I am eager to see how he ends up performing with the Raiders over the next couple of years. I've always really liked Derek Carr. I think he's a tremendous leader. He possesses all the intangibles needed. He also is very talented. There's a strong argument to be made that he's a top 10 quarterback. I think you can wrestle with a couple guys, perhaps the Lamar Jacksons, the Kyler Murrays, depending on where you view him. But he's a tremendous, tremendous quarterback. Tremendous quarterback. So I want to transition now to the MLB. I don't talk about the MLB too often, but I do think that this is a compelling story. And there have been reports recently about the Los Angeles Angels and them potentially being willing to trade their star two-way player, Shohei Ohtani. Now, the MLB trade deadline, it's fast approaching. August 2nd, which is next week, specifically next Monday or next Tuesday is when it's coming. And what we've known is that the Angels, unfortunately, have been kind of a constant disappointment over the last several years. In fact, this is an organization that has missed the postseason in 7 consecutive years. They're going on 8. But it's never been about the lack of star players or the lack of necessarily star talent. For whatever reason, the harmonies never existed. The unity has never been there. This team has never been able to gel. The personnel have never been able to kind of coagulate and actually become one hardened group. They've never been able to attain that type of team success that they've been seeking. And it's very perplexing as to why that is. But the fact that they have seemingly lacked that harmony and that unity has contributed to their losing seasons time and time again. Again, this is a team that hasn't had a lack of talent. They've had guys they still have Mike Trout. They've had guys like Albert Pujols, slightly past his prime, but still a very good player. Now they've got Shohei Ohtani. And you look at the Angels right now, they're 40-55 overall. They're 4th in the AL West. They have the 4th worst record in the American League. Their last postseason appearance came in 2014. They lost to the Kansas City Royals in the ALDS. Prior to that, the last postseason appearance came in 2009. They lost to the Yankees in the ALCS. And, of course, their lone World Series title came in 2002, which feels like eons ago. So because of their team's struggles over the last several years, and especially this year, given the start that they had, then they fired Joe Madden because of a 12-game losing streak, and now they're 15 games below 500. They're thinking about an implosion and trading away potentially some of their star players, which is the reason why they have finally began to entertain offers for Shohei Ohtani, because teams are starting to inquire about his availability. Now, what the Angels have made crystal clear is what their asking price is for Shohei Ohtani. And what they've come out and said is that they want established MLB players. They don't want prospects, because they still want to maintain some relevancy. They still want to compete for a playoff berth. And they're not in the business of acquiring prospects to be good 4, 5, 6 years down the line. They still have Mike Trout for the moment, for the time being, at least, and they still want to be a competitive ball club. But this is the dilemma that GMs really in all major sports have and that they face, which is when your team is struggling, do you start to trade away your best assets to become a much more balanced, a much more well-rounded team? Do you sacrifice the star power for depth? Or do you sacrifice your star power for a future? Because what they'd be saying is if they're trading off Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout's probably next on the trading block, and that they clearly don't believe in that core group of two guys. And for me, I think that would be a mistake. I think you try to surround those two stars with as much talent as you can, because Shohei Ohtani is just 28 years of age. He's in his 5th year in the MLB. He's coming off an MVP season, a year in which he blasted 46 home runs, back-to-back all-star selections. He's having a career year as a pitcher this year, 2.80 ERA, the best of his career. He's on pace to collect the most strikeouts he's ever had in a season. But this is the aspect of Shohei Ohtani that hasn't been discussed enough. And really, it's the one of the few linchpins that's keeping baseball pretty relevant is the popularity of Shohei Ohtani. What the Angels can't underscore enough is what his presence alone means for the relevancy of the Angels. Shohei Ohtani is arguably the most popular baseball player right now in the MLB. That includes guys like Mike Trout on his own team. That includes Aaron Judge on the Yankees. That includes Mookie Betts on the Dodgers. As far as appeal and draw, Shohei Ohtani might be the biggest draw in baseball. There's a reason why the MLB keeps marketing him and deploying all these huge marketing efforts to him. He was the cover of the MLB baseball game last season. He has been featured in more commercials now. He is a big personality. The problem is he doesn't really speak English, so it's a little bit harder for the American youth to gravitate towards him because he doesn't resonate as much. They can't understand him unless he's got his translator or he says something terse in English. So that's the problem, is his future is so bright that for the Angels to trade him away, it's not just about the star power. It's not just about the appeal. You're talking about relevancy. You're talking about a microscope that you won't have without him. We've seen no one's really cared about the Angels, even with Mike Trout over the last several years. It's been when Shohei Ohtani has burst onto the scene that all of a sudden we've examined the Angels. We've talked about the Angels a lot more than we had in recent years. Not to mention, he's given no indication that he wants out of LA. It's not a Juan Soto in the Nationals type of situation where he's declined multiple multi-year offers from the Nationals. Shohei Ohtani has given no indication he doesn't want to be with the Angels. And I do think that's also very important. You want to keep guys that are not only stars, but that want to be with your organization. I do think that's really important. Here's the other factor that I think is going to be the biggest obstacle and hurdle for the Angels if they are truly interested or entertaining offers for Shohei Ohtani. No team is going to trade for Shohei Ohtani midseason. At the earliest, this is going to come in the offseason, because you look at the demands of the Angels and what they've requested. They want established MLB players. They don't want any prospects. So what would that mean? Well, what that would mean is that a team in title contention that views themselves in title contention and views themselves as one piece away from competing, they'd have to gut their roster and send back a lot of quality guys just to acquire Shohei Ohtani. And which team, there are no teams that are competing for a pennant title that would even entertain gutting their team to acquire him midseason. They want to stay competitive. They want to stay relevant. That wouldn't make any sense. So I think that's probably the biggest obstacle. And again, if you trade him and you're the Angels, what does your future look like? What does that say about the direction of your franchise? What does it mean for Mike Trout? Probably means Mike Trout is on the trading block. And if you're an organization, you're trading Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, that would be a colossal failure in my eyes. So I don't envision them doing this. I think this is just smoke and mirrors. I think this is just a desperate move because the organization is flummoxed by their lack of success. But we'll see. The trade deadline is coming up next week, and we'll see what types of decisions are made. So final topic, my Malkins moments. I have some great Malkins moments for you. Sticking with baseball, the Dodgers collected an historic sweep of the San Francisco Giants over the weekend. They swept the Giants in their most recent 4-game series, which apparently happened for the first time since 1995. 27 years it hasn't happened between these two coastal rivals. They won 9-6 on Thursday, then 5-1, 4-2, and 7-4. But all the games were extremely tight. The Dodgers bats woke up. They hit so many home runs against the Giants in the 8th and the 9th inning that eventually they were able to prevail. But this series has been fantastic. You look at their history over the last several years, especially last year, the epic NL pennant race. 2 teams, both with over 100 wins in their own division. They faced off in the NLDS. It was an incredible 5-game series. The Dodgers prevailed in 5 games. Of course, the Dodgers just won a World Series 2 years ago. The Giants have won 2 World Series in the 2010 decade, 2012 and 2014, I believe. So this is a renewed rivalry. Both teams are finally good at the same time. And that's what had been lacking for so long, is the fact that neither side had been an elite team at the same time. In fact, last year's NLDS was the first time that those 2 teams had faced off against one another in the postseason. It had never happened. There have been a couple tight NL races and divisional races, but it was the first time that they'd met in the postseason. Now they're both starting to play well at the same time, and that NL West is still a very, very tough division, but an epic rivalry and a tremendous series victory and sweep for the Dodgers over the weekend. Shifting to golf, Tony Finau surged to win the 3M Open. He shot 4 under 67 on Sunday to win the 3M Open by 3 strokes. He actually was trailing 5 strokes with 11 holes to play, and then Scott Piercy unfortunately had a meltdown and tumbled down the stretch. But does not negate the fact that Finau was fantastic throughout the tournament. He shot 17 under for the entire tournament. At the Windy TPC Twin Cities event, it was the 3rd PGA Tour victory for Tony Finau. He's just a really good guy. You talk to him, he's very humble. His family was there with him. He's got 5 kids. He seems like a very genuine guy, and I'm happy for him. And what's impressive is he recorded the largest winning rally in 4 editions of the tournament. Again, trailed by 5 strokes with 11 holes to play. That's a very, very slim margin for error. So major shout out and congratulations to him. Finally, my final Malkins moment, ex-Laker Slava Medvedenko is apparently auctioning off his 2 championship rings to Ukraine for the relief effort to raise money for the kids and providing some athletic facilities for the kids. He's selling his 2 championship rings to raise money. He's a native of Ukraine. He's been fighting in the war with Ukraine. And apparently SCP Auctions is actually donating the entire final sale price of both rings to Medvedenko's Fly High Foundation. Again, it's a foundation that's raising money for the youth in Ukraine to provide them with athletic facilities and to give them access to facilities that they wouldn't have and obviously wouldn't have been, is not prioritized in the midst of a world war, or a war at least with Russia. So Medvedenko, he's 43. He was part of the Lakers championship teams in 2001, in 2001 and 2002. He joined the Lakers in 2000 and 2001 season, but is part of the championship team for the 01-02 titles with Shaq and Kobe. And he had not a very notable career with the Lakers, but did have a couple moments during the 2003-2004 season when Karl Malone was injured. He filled in for 38 games, had a career best 8 points, 5 rebounds. So he contributed. Then he got traded to the Atlanta Hawks in the 2006-2007 season. That was his final season in the NBA, but still was a member of those two championship teams. And it's a very commendable an admirable thing to sell those championship rings. He had mentioned how holding on to these material things isn't going to help assist his country. He wanted to help his country out, and it's a major, major selfless act on his part, and it's worthy of making my Malkin's moments. That's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_ JMalk97 on Instagram and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thanks so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.